Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're looking at the possibility, 43 years after the invasion of Cyprus by Turkish forces, we're looking at the possibility of a peace deal. Crunch talks taking place in Geneva. The UN Secretary General's flown in. So have the foreign ministers from the UK, Greece, Turkey, and the president of the European Commission. We're talking about it with our correspondent Jasper Mortimer, who's flown to Nicosia for the story. Also in the Cypriot capital, Andreas Theopanos, who heads the Cyprus Center for European and International Affairs in Geneva, where it's all happening. Freelance reporter Ezra Agon, and here in the studio, Andreas Evagora of Eurosport, who works across the street from our own studios, and who's obviously following this with family in Cyprus. Earlier this week, we were talking before the break about Turkey's vested interest in all this. Earlier this week, the Greek Prime Minister reminded audiences of the dual framework of the talk under the auspices of the United Nations, but also insists Alexis Tsipras within the framework of Cyprus's status as a member state of the European Union, which has the euro as its currency.
There can be no plan for a Cyprus solution that enables third countries to have rights of intervention and occupational armies. Ultimately, a solution can only be in the interests of Greek and Turkish Cypriots. In other words, a solution that ultimately will be viable, functional, and will remove fear from the people of Cyprus.
Andreas, when we hear Alexis Tsipras, it seems to just mirror the rhetoric we're hearing from the office of the Turkish Prime Minister.
Well, I think it is rhetoric, because one thing that should be said is certainly from the Greek Cypriot point of view, the stock of the European Union is very low after what happened with the financial crisis. But also the stock of Turkey and Greece is not very high either. There's a lot of mistrust among people on the island of anyone who's not on the island, and that includes the European Union, Greece and Turkey and Britain, because of all the things we've talked about in the past. So it's not that surprising. Having spoken to a couple of people on the island today, like any country, they don't like getting pushed around. They don't want the feeling that big countries are forcing them into a corner. That's why I agree with the correspondent in Geneva that it might take quite a bit longer than some media reporting today to find any kind of deal.
Might take quite a bit longer. And then there's the issue of Turkey itself. And I'll put it to you, Jasper Mortimer. You're based for us in Ankara. There are two schools of thoughts on this. One that says that the Turks, who've had a lot of setbacks of late, they need to be able to declare victory on one issue. And others who say, well, President Erdogan, he wants to change that constitution. He doesn't have enough votes. He'll need the support of hardline nationalists to get that done. And those hardline nationalists won't agree with a Cyprus deal.
Yeah, well, look, it is true that the most important thing on President Erdogan's agenda is a referendum this year, which he hopes will enhance his powers and make him an executive president. That is true. But that referendum will largely be decided by what the voters think of Erdogan on polling day. And when they consider Erdogan on polling day, the topmost issue in their minds will be the state of the economy. And Cyprus has got nothing to do with that. I think it's greatly exaggerated how much Cyprus plays a role in day-to-day Turkish politics. It is hardly mentioned. The only way in which the ultra-right party, which is the smallest party represented in parliament, could profit from the Cyprus dispute at Erdogan's expense is if the Turkish Cypriot leader were to accuse President Erdogan of selling him out. And I don't see that happening anyway. As long as the Turkish Cypriot leader, Mustafa Akinci, comes up with a plan which he and the Cypriot president, the Greek Cypriot leader, Nikos Anastasiades, thinks will work. If Akinci goes to Erdogan and says, this plan is workable, you should support it, Erdogan will support it. Erdogan will not push Akinci into something that he doesn't like. It's simply not true that a peace deal depends on Erdogan. A peace deal depends on what Mustafa Akinci and Nikos Anastasiades come up with together. If the plan they come up together with Akinci approves of, he takes it to Erdogan, he says, back me on this, Erdogan will back him. And it is also true that Erdogan is isolated in world affairs today. If he is seen with Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras as one of the godfathers of the reunification of Cyprus, that would be an enormous diplomatic coup, and Erdogan would bask in the glory of it.
And he could also stand, if I'm not mistaken, Jasper,
from it that way.
If I'm not mistaken, Turkey could also stand to have a little bit more energy independence. There's this talk about natural gas, which would come the way of Israel via waters controlled by Cyprus.
Yes, look, that's certainly there. That is a sort of a bonus, a carrot being held out to the two leaders of Cyprus to get their act together and come up with a workable plan. Another thing that could happen is that Greek Cypriots could take some of the water that Turkey is now delivering to Turkish Cyprus by undersea pipeline. There would be an economic boom on the island, and Turkey would stand to profit from that as well. But all of these economic advantages are there. Everybody has said that a settlement will profit both sides. The trouble is that carrot of an economic boom hasn't been enough so far to produce an agreement.
Esra Aygun, let me ask you, in Geneva right now, what's the mood like as far as that goes? As far as, again, these sponsor states, how much pressure can they put on Cyprus? You just heard Jasper Mortimer say, well, at the end of the day, not very much.
Look, I agree with Jasper to a degree. A lot depends on the two leaders, Mr. Akinci and Mr. Anastasiades. If they can at least solve the 5 issues or chapters that completely depend on Cypriots, which are governance and power sharing, property, EU territory and economy, then that would be a huge leverage on Turkey and Greece, who are the very influential guarantor, two of the very influential guarantor powers. It would be a big leverage. They could say, look, we, as the Cypriot leaders, have done whatever we could do. We have a deal between ourselves, and now it is up to you, the guarantor powers, to finish this, because certainly the security and guarantees chapter, unfortunately, cannot be finalized without an agreement between Turkey, Greece, and the United Kingdom. But as I said, if the two leaders do fulfill their own responsibilities and tell the guarantors that they have done everything and they are very close, and now it is just up to the guarantors to seal a deal, that would be a huge influence. Turkey has a huge influence on Turkish Cypriots. And on the politics of the Turkish Cypriots, on the economy of Turkish Cypriots. So Turkish Cypriots cannot or a deal in Cyprus cannot be made without Turkey's approval. Our opportunity right now is that it seems Turkey is supportive of a deal. It is ready to engage. Erdogan, to be honest, would be the only leader maybe in Turkey who could make a deal in Cyprus actually without being accused of selling Turkish Cypriots out, without being accused of being a traitor. He is very strong and he has had a very strong position in Cyprus since 2003. He has actually broke down taboos and he said we need a solution in Cyprus. So he can do this. However, I would like to add and underline that Turkey is very, very open about supporting this process for the last time. So, and there was another announcement by the Turkish Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu today in Geneva. He said, basically, we are supporting this process. We want this process to end in a solution. However, if this fails, future future attempts will not be within the same parameters. The parameters will change. So I think this is a very clear message, and this is an opportunity that we should not lose.
All right, let's bring in one more factor in all this. Cyprus became independent in 1960, but the UK still controls over a little over 3% of its territory, with those 2 military bases. Andreas Theopanos, what role for Britain in all of this?
Before that, I would like to clarify certain things.
Sure.
I heard about Akinci and then the 2 leaders in Cyprus. First of all, everybody knows in Cyprus, including the Turkish Cypriot, that Mr. Akinci or any Turkish Cypriot leader has a limit to what he can decide. Turkey has a very controlling influence on the northern part of Cyprus. So that's number one.
And you agree with Ezra on that point, that right now Erdogan wants a deal?
He wants a deal that will further advance Turkish interests. And I think what Erdogan needs is something that Greek Cypriots, the majority of them, feel that it will worsen the status quo for us. Cypriots are very pragmatic. They would support any solution that is perceived to be improving the status quo of today. We think that what is on the table so far does not do so. We also heard about an economic boom. I think this is a far-fetched perception in the sense, as things are today, and with the strict rules of the Eurozone, it will be impossible for Cyprus to function with a 3-government structure, with a lot of bottlenecks, and so on. There can be an economic boom with an alternative model which has more emphasis on an integrationalist approach. This approach today, it depends on a Bosnian model, and we know the outcome there. If this takes place in the case of Cyprus, it will not be only problematic for Cyprus, but it will bring more problems in the European Union.
All right, let me bring in Andreas Evagora on this one. Andreas, there's another example that we should mention about this. You just heard there Andreas Theopanos talk about the Bosnian model and how that didn't work very well. But what about Northern Ireland, where the EU, Britain and the Republic of Ireland are sponsors of the agreement that's been in place since the early 90s?
That's true, but Andreas makes a very important point, because it's a small country we're talking about, less than 1 million people, and most parties in the Cypriot parliament want an agreement where there is only one country. There's a centralized government as opposed to a federal system in a small country. So there could be the danger of having another layer, more complications, and going back to the system that existed in 1963, where there was duplication in government and so on, because of the rules we were talking about.
And right now in Geneva, that's what's on the table, right? A confederation.
But that's not the only solution. I mean, as I said, most of the parties in Cyprus, even though they're smaller parties, simply ask the question, why can't there be one country in which there's a centralised government for all of the island? Ireland is a completely different kettle of fish. There are some similarities, but it's fragile, the Republic of Ireland and Ireland as well. Look what's happening with the Euro. So I wouldn't make too many comparisons with what goes on in Ireland and Cyprus.
So I would also add, in relation to this, that one issue which is fundamental to the vast majority of Cypriots is the continuity of the Republic of Cyprus. And I would like to remind you that when Turkey invaded in 1974, it declared that its objective was to re-establish the constitutional order and protect the Turkish Cypriot community. In actual fact, Turkey destroyed the constitutional order of Cyprus, and it does not want to discuss its reforming 1960 constitution, taking into consideration all relevant factors. And furthermore, in relation to the Turkish Cypriots, I think many Turkish Cypriots feel suffocated by Turkey, in the sense that in the northern occupied part of Turkey, Turkish Cypriots are a minority right now. And there is, there are more settlers from Turkey. Even today, the foreign minister of Turkey, Mr. Çavuşoğlu, talked about the four fundamental freedoms of the European Union to apply for Turkish citizens in Cyprus. Turkey is not a member of the Union. Today, even Central European countries like Germany, Austria, France would be very hesitant to see the four fundamental freedoms for Turkish citizens in Europe. And in the case of Cyprus, we have a very bitter history of occupation, ethnic cleansing, and so on. So coming back to the Geneva talks, I think they were very hasty. The understanding was that such a meeting would take place if there was a comprehensive agreement reached in Nicosia. That did not take place. I don't expect that it will take place in this phase. So I think we have to reconsider. And my understanding.
All right, let me bring in Jasper Mortimer on this because we're running short on time. Jasper.
It may be better to have an evolutionary approach with more involvement of the European Union.
All right, so we need more time, is what you're saying. Let me bring in Jasper on this. Jasper, you just heard there Andreas Theopanos say that the time is not yet ripe. However, is it fair to say that these talks have gone further?
I'm saying that time is not ripe. I'm saying what is on the table does not lead to a comprehensive agreement which can satisfy the majority of Cypriots.
What's on the table is not yet ready, all right? Thanks for clarifying that. Jasper, nonetheless, they have gone further than ever before, what with that very publicized taking out of the maps to pore over and look over the specific territory.
Yes, they certainly have gone further than before. And when you think of the comparisons of those maps, at the moment, backed by the Turkish troops, Turkish Cyprus consists of 36% of the island. According to the maps exchanged yesterday and then put in a UN vault, and it was the first time the two sides had exchanged maps, the Turkish Cypriots are prepared to bring their side of the island down to 29.2% of the island. And the Greek Cypriots want the Turkish Cypriot share of the island to be reduced to 28.2%. In other words, there was a 1% difference between them over the allocation of territory. And I think it's marvelous that the two sides have got so close. They've never been that close before. And when you get within 1% of drawing up the boundaries of the constituent states of the future Confederation of Cyprus, I think you're within reach of a deal.
I think we have different perceptions. You're talking about the boundaries, you're talking about the confederation. The territorial issue, it's a major dimension. It's not the only one. We see the issues of. We have to create an atmosphere where we should encourage the creation of a common agenda between the two communities. This constitution does not do that. As a matter of fact, if we have a more integrationalist federal model, we wouldn't have the territorial issue as it is. Instead of having constituent states, it may be better to talk about provinces, in which there is autonomy on the one part, and at the same time, there is a federal government that can address the major issues. And we would like to see a situation where we whenever we discuss issues, we can see what can unite us. For example, we can have common economic challenges, economic opportunities. We have to address environment issues, energy issues. It should not be a dichotomy like it was in the past. We
Not to be a dichotomy like it was in the past. We're almost out of time. Ezra Aygun, do you agree?
Okay, a correction first. What is being sought in Cyprus today, what is on the table, is not a confederation. It is a very clear bizonal, bicommunal federation with the political equality of the two sides. I don't agree that it is too early or it is too hasty. Rejectionists, and I know Mr. Theophanos is not a very big admirer of unification. Rejectionists will always say it is too early. They will always say it is too hasty. Excuse me, can I please finish my word? It is the time is just right, and this may be our last chance. And it is not only me saying this, Mr. Akıncı is giving this message very clearly. As Mr. Theophanos pointed out correctly, the demography of North Cyprus is changing. Turkish Cypriots are immigrating to other countries. More Turkish citizens are settling in the north, and the physical situation in the north is changing too. Buildings are being built. So if we continue to say it is too early, it is too hasty, we don't like this federation, we want that kind of a federation, I fear that we will not be able to find a single Turkish Cypriot to make a deal with very soon, or a single square meter of land to return to Greek Cypriots.
All right,
so
we're gonna have to.
Time is just right.
Timing is right now, you're saying. Ezra Aygun, so many thanks for joining us from Geneva. I want to thank
Thank
well
you.
Andreas Theopanos and Jasper Mortimer for being with us from Nicosia. I want to thank as well Andreas Evagora. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. Hello to James Creedon.
Hi, François. Lots on the debate topic on various news websites across the EU and broader afield. I'll just give you a look at some of how today's events have been reported online. The EU Observer, their headline hails this, well, it's a quote, as a significant milestone having been reached in these reunification talks. So that's how the EU Observer is summing it up. The Cyprus Mail, one English language publication in Cyprus, has been doing live updates all afternoon as the talks progress. So some of what they have, well, this wasn't actually on their live updates, but it's one of the elements I found on social media that indeed is a positive symbol, I suppose, of those talks moving in the right direction. Meanwhile, UN Geneva on their official Twitter page are quoting also very optimistic phrases. We are coming very close to settlement implementation, satisfying concerns of both communities. That's a quote.
It's the first foreign foray for the new UN Secretary General.
That's right. So perhaps one that does indeed have a hope of being successful. At the conference on Cyprus, this is the EU foreign minister, essentially. At the conference on Cyprus in the UN in Geneva with Jean-Claude Juncker. Impressive work already done. The EU is looking forward to welcoming a united Cyprus. So certainly from the rhetoric coming out of the EU and the UN, it almost sounds like a done deal in some respects. Cyprus can be a symbol of hope. That is also what Antonio Guterres has been saying. So perhaps a symbol for other islands or spaces that might be divided in some way politically. Jean-Claude Juncker also tweeting, working hand in hand with my friend Antonio Guterres for the success of the Cyprus settlement talks in Geneva. Now, somewhat more tempered a point of view coming through in other media. There's the Hurriyet Daily News. Now, they're talking about the temptation of blaming Turkey for any potential hiccups or obstacles in these talks. I'll just quote a little bit from that article. But here, the Turkish side is running the risk of being a victim of Erdogan's international image. Erdogan has been projecting the image of a leader who wants one-man rule and wants to have the last word. Athens too is carrying a lot of responsibility for the successful end to these peace talks. But when you compare the all-smiling Alexis Tsipras with the West-bashing Erdogan, who do you think is going to get the blame in the case of a failure? So they're saying there that the Turkish side in the Cypriot talks are perhaps damaged in terms of their international image because of Erdogan's international image.
That's interesting because Hurriyet Daily News is not necessarily pro-Erdogan in the slightest. And there is this feeling that when it comes to the issue of Cyprus, these old suspicions rise to the fore.
Well, they're already setting themselves up for failure, aren't they? They're saying, oh, if it doesn't work, then who's to blame? So
right.
I fear that the leaders have really putting their heads on the block here in Geneva, and there's a long, long way to go. Right. Remember, it has to be agreed by both sides, and the fear on Cyprus is always it's a zero-sum game. If it's good for the other side, that means there's a problem for us.
Speaking of, what about Moscow? Cyprus fears Russia could wreck reunification. This is Politico.eu. Quite a detailed article, but they talk about how Russia did vote against at the UN the consequences of reunification during a referendum in 2004, that they sort of put obstacles in the way of that in 2004, and that basically from the Russian point of view, it's not necessarily in their interests to see reunification happen for geostrategic regions, for fear that a united Cyprus would join NATO because of pipeline concerns. A pipeline going from Cyprus through to Israel could negatively impact on Russia's interests. So might Russia actually try to wield its soft power to prevent these talks from being successful?
James Creedon, many thanks for that. I want to thank our panelists once again. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.